The unexpected war. The galaxy had been at peace for centuries. At least, that's what the weak believed. But in the shadows, war was always brewing, waiting for the right moment to strike. For the Zorethians, a peaceful and intelligent race, war was something they had only read about in history books. They built towering cities, focused on science, and believed that diplomacy could solve any conflict. They were wrong. When the Kryn arrived, there was no negotiation, no warnings, no demands, just fire and death. The Kryn warlords were a race of brutal conquerors, leaving entire planets in ruin. They thrived on destruction, treating other species like insects to be crushed. The moment their warships entered Zorethian space, the war was already lost. A desperate plea. On the capital planet Zora Prime, Supreme Chancellor Valix stood in the Grand Hall, watching in horror as reports came in. Cities are burning. Millions are dead. The Kryn are unstoppable. Valix's hands trembled as he turned to his advisors. Has anyone answered our distress call? One of his aides shook his head. The Galactic Council has ignored us. The Draken Empire refuses to get involved. No one wants to fight the Kryn. Silence filled the hall. They had begged for help, but the galaxy had abandoned them. Then, an old general stepped forward. His voice was low, hesitant. There is one more species we could ask. Valix frowned. Who? The general swallowed hard. Humans. Gasps echoed through the room. The name alone sent chills down their spines. The feared species. The humans were a mystery. They had been part of the galactic community once, centuries ago. But after a single war, they vanished. No one knew where they went. No one dared to find out. The stories said that when humans went to war, they did not fight for survival. They fought to win. And when they won, they made sure their enemies never rose again. Valix hesitated. Could they trust such a species? But then he remembered the burning cities, the dead children, the cries of his people. He clenched his fists. Send the message. The answer. The distress signal was sent through encrypted channels, a desperate cry across the stars. To the lost warriors of Earth, the Zorethians need your help. The Kryn will destroy us all. If you hear this message, please, help us. They expected silence. Instead, within minutes, a reply came. A simple message. We heard you. The room fell into stunned silence. The humans had answered, but no one knew if that was a good thing or a nightmare waiting to happen. The Kryn's march. Meanwhile, in deep space, the Kryn warlord, Commander Xyrax, stood aboard his warship, watching as his fleet approached Zora Prime. To him, this was just another victory, another weak species that would beg before being crushed. His second-in-command bowed. Supreme Warlord, the Zorethians are defenseless. Their allies have abandoned them. The planet will be ours within hours. Xyrax grinned, his sharp teeth glinting. Good. We will burn their cities, enslave their people, and erase their history. This is the way of the Kryn. He turned to his officers. Begin the assault. The sky turns black. As the first wave of Kryn ships prepared to bombard Zora Prime, something strange happened. The sky darkened. The stars disappeared. No, something was blocking them. Xyrax frowned. What is that? His officers scrambled at their monitors. Warlord, new ships detected. Hundreds of massive warships emerged from hyperspace like shadows cutting through the void. Black, angular, and unlike anything seen before. The Kryn officers panicked. That's impossible. No one has warships that size. Who are they? A message appeared on the Kryn's main screen. A human voice, calm yet filled with something ancient. Something deadly. You have made a mistake. Xyrax growled. Who dares to speak to me like that? The voice remained emotionless. We are humanity. And then the first human shot was fired. The war had truly begun. Humanity responds. The Kryn warlord, Commander Xyrax, stared at the view screen in disbelief. Humanity. He had heard the legends, the whispered stories told by dying empires. But they were myths, nothing more. Yet here they were. Real, present, and very, very angry. His war fleet had arrived over Zora Prime, expecting an easy victory. The Zorathians had no real military, no allies willing to fight. The Kryn were supposed to crush this planet in mere hours. But now, the sky itself had turned black with human warships. Each vessel was a titan, sleek and deadly, absorbing all light like a void in space. Kryn sensors flickered wildly, unable to scan the ships properly. It was as if the universe itself refused to reveal their secrets. Then, the first human transmission arrived. A simple message. You should have run. The first strike. Xyrax roared. Fire. Erase them from existence. The Kryn ships opened fire, unleashing a storm of plasma torpedoes and energy beams. But the human warships didn't even flinch. Their shields absorbed the attacks without a single flicker. Then the humans responded. It wasn't a barrage. It wasn't a desperate counterattack. It was precision destruction. One human battleship turned its weapons on the nearest Kryn destroyer. A single railgun shot fired. And the Kryn destroyer ceased to exist. The shot didn't just tear through the ship, it vaporized it. A 500-meter-long warship reduced to atoms in an instant. The Kryn fleet froze. They had faced resistance before, but nothing like this. The silence of the dead. Xyrax clenched his fists. Impossible. That was a lucky shot. Another human warship fired. Another Kryn vessel vanished. Then another, and another. One by one, the Kryn fleet was being systematically erased. The Kryn officers, once so confident, now trembled at their consoles. One of them gasped, Warlord, they're not fighting a battle. They're executing us. Xyrax bared his teeth. He refused to believe it. The Kryn had conquered hundreds of worlds. They were the strongest. And yet, the humans do not forget. On the bridge of the lead human warship, Admiral Riker stood calmly, hands behind his back. His face was cold, emotionless. He had seen this before. A younger officer approached him, nervous. Sir, the Kryn are trying to retreat. Riker didn't react. Another officer hesitated. Should we let them go? Riker finally spoke. His voice was steel. Did they let the Zorathians go? Silence filled the bridge. The Kryn had slaughtered civilians, burned cities, erased history. Now it was their turn to be erased. Riker raised his hand. Finish them. The last stand of the Kryn. The Kryn fleet tried to flee, but the humans were faster, more precise. The black warships moved like predators, cutting through the Kryn fleet with ease. One Kryn captain screamed over the comms, begging for mercy. Please, we surrender. The humans did not respond. Their railguns tore through ship after ship. The Kryn warlord Xyrax watched as his once great fleet was reduced to burning wreckage. He had always believed that the Kryn were the strongest. Now, as his own ship was surrounded by human vessels, he realized the truth. They had awakened a nightmare. Humanity had not just returned. They had never left. The warning. The last thing Xyrax saw was the incoming human warship's weapons charging up one final shot. And then, nothing. The Kryn fleet was gone. The Zorathians, watching from below, could hardly believe it. Velix stood in shock, his voice barely above a whisper. The Kryn are gone. A transmission came through. The humans were calling them. Admiral Riker's face appeared on the screen. His expression was unreadable. The Kryn will never harm you again. His voice was calm, but there was something else in his tone. A warning. Velix swallowed. You saved us. What do you want in return? Riker didn't blink. Nothing. The Zorathian Chancellor hesitated. Then, why did you help us? Riker finally spoke the words that sent chills across the galaxy. Because we remember what it was like when no one answered our call for help. And with that, the human fleet vanished into the void. But their message remained. The galaxy had learned a lesson that day. If you ever find yourself in need of salvation, pray that it is humanity who answers. The unstoppable armada. The Kryn Empire was gone. At least, that's what the Zorathians thought. But war never truly ends with a single battle. It lingers in the echoes of destruction, in the survivors who remember, in the fear that spreads across the stars. And while the Kryn war fleet had been wiped out above Zora Prime, the true heart of the Kryn Empire still existed, hidden in the darkness of space, seething with rage. The Empire's last hope. Deep within the Kryn stronghold world of Varlock, the High Warlord Kargeth sat upon his throne, watching the disaster unfold. The reports had been coming in for hours. Every message was the same. Total fleet loss. No survivors. The humans came. The humans destroyed. The humans disappeared. His claws dug into the metal arms of his throne. Kryn fleets had crushed entire civilizations. They had burned planets, enslaved species, and rewritten the stars with blood. But now, they were the ones afraid. A commander knelt before him, shaking. Supreme Warlord, our outer colonies are in chaos. Our vassal races are rebelling. Everyone fears the return of the humans. Kargeth's voice was cold. Are they coming? The commander hesitated. We don't know. That was the terrifying part. The humans hadn't responded. They had wiped out an entire fleet and then vanished. No demands, no conquests, no threats, just silence. And that was worse than war. A question of power. The Galactic Council had gathered in secret. The destruction of the Kryn fleet had shaken the entire galactic order. Species who had once whispered of humanity in fear were now terrified beyond words. Ambassadors from the Draken Empire, the Varisha Republic, the Silani Consortium, and others sat in the vast chamber, their voices raised in panic. They wiped out an entire armada in less than an hour. They have technology beyond anything we've seen. We must act. Humanity is too dangerous. At the head of the council, the Grand Arbiter of the Galactic Order, a wise and ancient being, listened carefully. His deep, silver eyes reflected centuries of knowledge. Then he spoke, his voice soft but filled with weight. Have they attacked anyone else? Silence filled the chamber. The ambassadors exchanged glances. No, one finally admitted. The Grand Arbiter nodded. Then why do we assume they will? A Draken representative growled, slamming a fist onto the table. Because they can. And a species with that much power will not stay silent forever. The room fell into hushed murmurs. Fear was taking over. And fear, in politics, was the most dangerous weapon of all. The storm approaches. Back on Zora Prime, Supreme Chancellor Valix stood on the balcony of the Grand Hall, staring at the stars. The humans were out there, somewhere, watching. They had saved his people without asking for anything, but that only raised more questions. What did they want? Why had they disappeared? Would they return? Behind him, an aide approached hesitantly. Sir, more messages are coming in. Dozens of species are reaching out to us. Valix turned, curious. Why? The aide shifted nervously. Some want to form alliances with us, hoping that humanity will protect them too. Valix frowned. And the others? The aide hesitated before answering. They want to know how to kill a human. Valix's blood ran cold. The galaxy had made a decision. It wasn't going to welcome humanity. It was going to fear them. The Kryn's answer. The Kryn Empire was desperate. And desperation breeds madness. High Warlord Kargeth called upon his last, most dangerous asset, the Elder Hunters. These were not ordinary warriors. They were assassins, spies, killers who had brought down empires from within. And now, Their mission was simple: find the humans and end them. The silent war begins. The galaxy was shifting. Lines were being drawn. Some species wanted to worship humanity as protectors. Others wanted to eliminate them before they became unstoppable. And in the dark corners of space, the Kryn's elder hunters began their hunt. But what no one understood, what no one had prepared for, was that humanity was already watching. They had seen this happen before. And this time, they would strike first. The wrath of humanity. The galaxy was restless. For centuries, empires had ruled through diplomacy, alliances, and carefully measured wars. But after the Battle of Zora Prime, everything changed. Humanity had returned, not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as something far more terrifying. A force that destroyed without hesitation and disappeared without a trace. And now, the galaxy was left with an impossible question. What happens when the most dangerous species in existence chooses to act? The Assassin's Mission. High Warlord Kargath stood in the war chamber of Varlock, his sharp claws tracing the holographic projection of the known galaxy. His elite assassins, the Elder Hunters, knelt before him. Each one had taken part in the downfall of entire civilizations. They had infiltrated governments, poisoned rulers, and turned armies against themselves. But even they hesitated when given their newest mission. One of the hunters, a towering Kryn named Sulik, finally spoke. "Warlord, there is no known human homeworld. Their fleets appear and vanish. Their technology is—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Beyond our understanding." Kargath's red eyes burned with fury. "Find them. Find out what they are. Find out what they want." The assassins exchanged uneasy glances. They all knew the truth. The last fleet to encounter humanity had ceased to exist. Would they be next? A warning in blood. Across the galaxy, whispers of humanity spread like wildfire. But humanity was not idle. They knew the Kryn were hunting them. They knew the Galactic Council feared them. And so, they acted first. It began with the disappearance of entire Kryn colonies. At first, the Kryn warlords thought it was rebellion, but when their scouts arrived, they found something far worse. Cities were intact, but silent. Not a single body, no wreckage, no signs of battle, just emptiness. Then the messages came. Short, simple transmissions, broadcasted across the stars. "You should have left us alone." And then, a week later, another Kryn fleet vanished. Kargath slammed his fists onto his war table. "What are they doing?" he roared. His advisors were silent, because no one had an answer. The Council's fear. The Galactic Council reconvened, their chamber filled with nervous murmurs. The Draken, the Exilani, the Varshar, all great empires, sat in fear. "We must make contact," one ambassador pleaded. "We must find out what they want." But others were not so eager. A Draken general snarled. "Contact? Have you lost your mind? They are monsters. They don't negotiate. They eradicate." The Grand Arbiter leaned forward, his silver eyes filled with wisdom and worry. "Then tell me, General, if we do not speak to them, what do you propose?" The Draken general hesitated, because the only alternative was war. The first encounter, the Council decided to act. They gathered a neutral fleet, made up of ships from different empires, and sent it into the void where humanity had last been seen. A diplomatic attempt, a desperate plea for peace. But when they arrived, they found nothing. Just the cold, empty abyss of space. For days, they searched. Then, on the 5th day, a transmission appeared on every screen. A simple, calm voice. "Turn back." The ambassadors looked at each other in fear. One, a Xilani diplomat, swallowed hard and spoke into the comms. "We seek only peace. We wish to understand you." For a moment, silence. Then, the voice returned. "You already understand. You just don't want to admit it. The fleet froze. Then, without warning, hundreds of human warships emerged from the void. They were there the entire time. Watching. Waiting. The Exilani diplomat's breath hitched. By the stars. The largest human ship, so enormous that it blocked out an entire section of space, sent one final message. Do not make us remind you why you feared us in the first place. Then, in an instant, the human fleet disappeared again. A galaxy on the edge. The Council fleet returned without firing a single shot. But they did not return as ambassadors. They returned as witnesses. Witnesses to the power that lurked in the shadows. The Council was left with one chilling realization. Humanity wasn't just back. They had never left. And now, the galaxy had two choices. Coexist, or prepare for the wrath of humanity. The Kryn's last stand. The galaxy was in turmoil. The destruction of the Kryn war fleet had sent shockwaves through the stars. The disappearance of their colonies had left the strongest warlords trembling. And the silent warnings from humanity had pushed the Galactic Council into a state of sheer panic. But fear breeds desperate actions. And for the Kryn Empire, desperation meant war. The Supreme Warlord's decision. In the depths of Varlock, the Kryn homeworld, Supreme Warlord Kargath sat in his war throne, staring at a holographic projection of the human ships. These weren't the grainy, distorted images his scouts had captured. No, this was a direct feed from the last transmission of his fleet before it was annihilated. Black warships, silent, unstoppable. They had watched as one by one, his forces had been erased. The Kryn warlords around him, once proud and arrogant, now sat in silence. None dared to speak. Finally, Kargath's deep, rumbling voice broke the stillness. This war is not over. One of his subordinates, a scared veteran named Vurik, cleared his throat nervously. Warlord, the fleets we sent are gone. We don't even know where the humans are. How do we fight an enemy we cannot find? Kargath's blood-red eyes burned with rage. You don't find an enemy like this. You force them to reveal themselves. A murmur spread through the war chamber. Vurik frowned. How? Kargath leaned forward. His claws tapped against the cold steel of the war table. We take something they care about. A chilling silence fell over the room. The Kryn had spent centuries fighting species across the galaxy. They had learned how to break enemies, how to force them into battle. But humanity was different. The humans had no homeworld that anyone knew of. No visible colonies. No apparent weaknesses. So what did they care about? Kargath's lips curled into a cruel smile. The Zorathians. Gasps echoed in the chamber. The Zorathians had been the reason humanity revealed itself. The reason they had destroyed an entire fleet in less than an hour. Kargath stood, towering over the others. His deep voice was filled with dark amusement. If humanity truly cares for them, then they will come. And this time, he said, we will be ready. The trap is set. The Kryn gathered everything they had left. Massive war fleets were recalled from the outer territories. Secret weapons, planet-destroying behemoths, were pulled from hidden factories. And then they attacked Zora Prime, the once healing planet, still bearing the scars of the last Kryn invasion, suddenly found itself under siege once more. Zorathian ships tried to resist, but they were outmatched. The Kryn had come prepared for war. This was not an invasion. It was a hostage situation. In mere hours, the planet fell under Kryn control. And then, they sent out their message. To humanity. The Kryn's final message. Across the stars, a transmission echoed. To the so-called warriors of Earth, you took our fleets. You stole our power. Now, we take your prize. A live feed played, showing millions of Zorathians kneeling in chains. Kryn soldiers stood over them, weapons raised, ready to strike at a moment's notice. Then, Kargath's monstrous form appeared on the screen, his cruel grin stretching wide. Come save them, if you dare. And then, the message ended. The silent response. The galaxy held its breath. Would humanity respond? Would they risk war once again? For 2 days, nothing happened. No human transmissions, no fleets, no threats, just silence. But then, on the 3rd day, something changed. The Kryn lost contact with 5 of their border stations. No distress signals, no explosions, just silence. Then, a Kryn fleet patrolling the outer territories vanished. By the end of the week, a dozen more warships had disappeared. And finally, the humans spoke. A single transmission was broadcast across the galaxy. A single, cold sentence. You wanted us to come. We're here. The sky burns. Kargath stood on the bridge of his warship, staring at the fleet he had assembled. Thousands of ships. Their strongest weapons. The combined might of the entire Kryn Empire. And yet, as he looked at the stars, his claws trembled. Because something was wrong. The stars were disappearing. No, something was covering them. A dark wave of warships emerged from hyperspace, stretching across the sky like an endless storm. Humanity had arrived. And this time, they were not alone. The allies of humanity. The Zorathians had sent their distress signal the moment the Kryn invaded. They had expected only silence. Instead, they received an answer. Not just from humanity, but from dozens of species. Species that had been crushed by the Kryn. Species that had lived in fear of them for centuries. They had seen what humanity did to the Kryn fleet, and they had made a choice. They would stand with humanity. And so, the human fleet was not just human anymore. It was a coalition, a force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. And as the Kryn warlords looked upon this unstoppable armada, they finally understood. They were not facing a war. They were facing extinction. The first shot. For a moment, there was silence. Then, Admiral Riker's voice rang across the battlefield. No more warnings. No more second chances. Today, the Kryn Empire dies. And then, with a single command, humanity fired. The final battle had begun. The final blow. The stars themselves seemed to tremble as the largest fleet in galactic history clashed in the void above Zora Prime. On one side, the Kryn Empire, battered yet unbroken, had amassed every last warship, every last weapon, every last soldier for this final confrontation. On the other side, the armada of humanity and its newfound allies, a force of species once thought weak, now standing together under the banner of the most feared warriors in the galaxy. This was not just a battle. This was retribution. The storm breaks. Admiral Riker stood on the bridge of the Uasia Revenant, the flagship of the human fleet. Through the viewport, he watched as the Kryn warships formed a defensive line, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. "They're afraid," his XO, Commander Voss, muttered. Riker nodded. "They should be." With a wave of his hand, the human fleet opened fire. A wall of energy erupted from thousands of human railguns, plasma cannons, and hypervelocity missiles. The void between the fleets was instantly filled with streaking lights, a storm of destruction racing toward the Kryn. The first impact was devastating. The Kryn's forward fleet, expecting a conventional assault, was torn apart within seconds. Ships that had once ruled the galaxy were ripped in half, their shields shattered like glass. And yet, the Kryn did not break. They had prepared for this moment. High Warlord Kargath, aboard his own massive battleship, the Dreadlord, bared his teeth in a vicious snarl. "Humans, you are not gods." He raised a clawed hand. "Return fire. Unleash everything." The Kryn ships, outnumbered but desperate, fired their planet-killer weapons, weapons capable of destroying moons, capable of tearing civilizations apart. And yet, nothing happened. The shield of Earth. The Kryn's most powerful weapons slammed into a wall of golden energy, a shield unlike anything ever seen in the galaxy. It stretched across the entire human fleet, absorbing the devastation with ease. Kargath's eyes widened in shock. "What is this?" Riker's voice cut through the static, cold, and merciless. "Did you think we came unprepared?" For centuries, humanity had been perfecting its war technology in the shadows. They had studied every alien weapon, predicted every possible attack, developed countermeasures beyond imagination. And now, the Kryn's ultimate weapons were useless. They had no defense. The spear of humanity. "Begin the second phase," Riker commanded. The human fleet shifted, and a new type of warship emerged. Massive vessels, unlike anything seen before, lined up in perfect synchronization. Not battleships, not dreadnoughts, something new. The Kryn watched in horror as the weapons on these new ships began to glow. Not with plasma, not with railgun energy, but with something far worse. Riker's voice echoed through the battlefield. Fire. A single pulse of light shot forward, so fast, so precise, that the Kryn had no time to react. And then, everything changed. The Dreadlord, the Kryn's most powerful warship, began to disintegrate from the inside. Not explode, not burn. It simply ceased to exist. Every molecule of its structure was unraveled in an instant, erased from reality itself. The Kryn warlords screamed. "What? What is that weapon?" One of them shrieked. But there was no answer. Because the humans didn't need to explain. The end of the Kryn. Panic spread through the Kryn fleet. Their greatest warship was gone. Their weapons were useless, and the human fleet was closing in. One by one, the remaining Kryn vessels began to flee. It was chaos. Some tried to run, others tried to surrender. But the humans gave them no mercy. Kargath, aboard the last surviving warship, watched as his empire crumbled around him. He trembled, not from rage, but from true, unshakable fear. "Tell me, human," he growled, his voice breaking. "What do you want?" Riker's image appeared on his screen. The Admiral's expression was unreadable, emotionless. "We warned you," Riker said. "You didn't listen." Kargath's eyes widened. He had never felt so small. You're monsters," he whispered. Riker tilted his head. "So were you." The final human shot struck Kargath's ship, and a Kryn warlord was no more. The silence after war. The battle was over. The Kryn Empire was gone. Across the galaxy, species that had once feared the Kryn now looked toward Earth. But they did not see conquerors. They did not see rulers. They saw something far more terrifying. A force that only acted when provoked. A power that wiped out its enemies without hesitation. A civilization that had chosen to stay silent for centuries, and had still emerged as the strongest. And then, just as suddenly as they had arrived, the human fleet vanished. No demands, no occupation, no warnings, just silence. The legacy of the battle. The Galactic Council gathered for an emergency session. One by one, the leaders of every empire stood. Some called for diplomacy, others called for isolation. But one thing was clear to them all. Humanity was watching, and if anyone dared to challenge them again, they would not survive the answer. A new era. The war was over. The Kryn Empire, once the most feared force in the galaxy, no longer existed. Their fleets were gone, their colonies reduced to ghost worlds, and their warlords erased from history. The galaxy should have felt safe. But instead, it trembled. For while the Kryn were a known terror, humanity was something else entirely. The aftermath of annihilation. Across the galaxy, the remnants of Kryn-controlled territories fell into chaos. Once enslaved species rose up, overthrowing their Kryn overseers. Cities that had been under Kryn rule for centuries now stood empty, their former masters wiped from existence. The Zorathians, now free, struggled to comprehend what had happened. Their supreme chancellor, Velix, stood in the Grand Hall of Zora Prime, surrounded by his advisors. A massive screen showed live footage of Kryn ruins, abandoned warships floating in space like grave markers. They didn't just defeat the Kryn, one advisor whispered. They erased them. Velix nodded, still processing it all. The humans had not taken Kryn territory. They had not claimed Kryn resources. They had not asked for anything in return. They had simply destroyed the Empire and left. And that, more than anything, terrified the galaxy. The Galactic Council's debate. A week after the battle, the Galactic Council convened in a secret emergency meeting. Representatives from every major empire were present, their voices raised in a mix of panic, confusion, and desperation. We must act. An ambassador from the Draken Empire growled. The humans destroyed the Kryn as if they were nothing. What if we are next? They have given no indication that they seek war, the Var Shar Prime Minister countered. They had every chance to conquer worlds, to impose their rule, and they did not. That's exactly the problem. A Exilani senator interjected. We understand empires that seek power. We can negotiate with them. But this, he gestured toward a holographic display of human warships. How do we deal with something that doesn't want anything? The room fell silent, because no one had an answer. The search for Earth. Desperation led to recklessness. The Council authorized covert operations to locate Earth, the fabled homeworld of humanity. Hundreds of probes were launched into the unknown regions of space. Elite spies were deployed, infiltrating Zorathian networks and other sources that might hold even a fragment of information. But no matter how deep they searched, they found nothing. Every trace of Earth was gone, as if it had never existed at all. One probe reported a dead system filled with ruined planets, but its signal vanished before it could send full data. The scout ships sent after it never returned. After months of searching, the Council realized the horrifying truth. Humanity had erased its own homeworld from all records. A message from the void. Then, one night, a single transmission arrived. It did not come from any known coordinates. It was untraceable. The message was simple. You are searching in the wrong place. The Council chambers fell into silence as the transmission played on repeat. It was not a threat, not a warning, just a statement of fact. Humanity's next move. The truth was clear now. Humanity was watching. They knew the Council was trying to find them. They knew the galaxy feared them. And yet, they did nothing. They did not respond with war. They did not issue threats. They simply let the galaxy stew in its own paranoia. The birth of the Shadow Empire. With the Kryn gone, many expected humanity to fade back into legend. But something unexpected happened. On the edges of known space, new technologies began to appear. Starships with human-like engineering were spotted in neutral territories, left abandoned but fully functional. Blueprints for impossibly advanced reactors were mysteriously leaked to struggling civilizations. Medical advancements years ahead of any known species were discovered in isolated stations. But no matter how hard anyone searched, no human was ever found. It was as if humanity was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The final lesson. A decade passed. The galaxy changed. New alliances were formed. Old empires crumbled. But the fear of humanity remained. And then one day, another message arrived, broadcasted to every species, every government, every warlord. A simple, final statement. You were right to fear us, but you were wrong about why. The message ended there. No explanation, no demands, and no one ever dared to search for humanity again. Because by then, they finally understood. Humanity was no longer a nation. It was an idea, a shadow in the dark, a force that would never be seen, unless provoked. And if that day ever came, the galaxy knew what the answer would be. Epilogue. The unseen guardians. In the depths of an uncharted sector, Hidden beyond the reach of any known star charts, a fleet of black warships drifted silently through space. On the bridge of the USS Revenant, Admiral Riker watched as new reports came in. The galaxy was stabilizing. The surviving empires were cautious but peaceful, and the name of humanity was spoken only in hushed whispers. He exhaled slowly. They won't make the same mistake again. Beside him, Commander Voss smirked. And if they do? Riker's eyes darkened. Then we remind them. With a quiet hum, the human fleet faded into hyperspace, disappearing into the void once more. Waiting. Watching. Forever.